Who Killed President Kennedy? A game theory, public choice and interest group analysis, the only coherent theory. The 22nd of November 1963, Dallas, Texas. A bright sun, a waving crowd, a young president full of confidence, full of promise, gliding through the city in an open car. No one sees what's coming. 12:30 p.m., Dealey Plaza. 3 shots, 8 seconds, chaos, screams. A nation frozen in disbelief. And almost instantly, the story America is told is simple, clean, and supposedly airtight. One man, one gun, one unbelievable act. Lee Harvey Oswald, the lone assassin. But the deeper we travel into the evidence, the intelligence networks, the political rivalries, the incentives, and the cold logic of strategic behavior, the more fragile the story becomes. Lee Harvey Oswald, an average marksman, using a worn rifle. The infamous magic bullet somehow hitting multiple targets. He only got the job and the apartment around the time Kennedy's route became known, and before he could speak, he is killed by Jack Ruby. This documentary explores the Kennedy assassination through the lenses of game theory, the logic of strategy under pressure, public choice theory, how institutions really behave, Mancur Olson's interest group theory, how small groups exert disproportionate power. A model that may explain not only who could have killed JFK, but why the truth has remained buried for over 60 years. At 1:50 p.m., less than 90 minutes after the assassination, Dallas police arrest 24-year-old Lee Harvey Oswald. He claims he is innocent, he insists he is being framed, he asks for legal representation and refuses to confess. And then, in a move that defies logic, standards, and the entire practice of criminal investigations, he is murdered before he can talk. On November 24th, Jack Ruby, a Dallas nightclub owner with murky connections, shoots Oswald in the basement of the police headquarters. Live on national television. Less than 48 hours between arrest and death. In game theory, that's not just suspicious, it's textbook. The highest risk player, the one most likely to defect, the one with the least loyalty, the one with the most damaging information, is eliminated before interrogation stabilizes the system. If Oswald truly acted alone, killing him makes no sense. If Oswald was part of something larger, knowingly or unknowingly, killing him makes perfect sense. If anyone had the motivation and the power to find the truth, it was Robert F. Kennedy, the president's brother and the Attorney General of the United States. RFK had access to the CIA, the FBI, military intelligence, the White House communication network, yet almost immediately he confides to close aides. It could have been the CIA. This wasn't paranoia. This was a calculation. RFK considered 3 main possibilities. Soviet Union or Cuba. Oswald had lived in Russia, married a Russian wife, and tried to defect. He visited the Cuban embassy. He expressed Marxist beliefs, but intelligence briefings quickly ruled out foreign governments, no signs of preparation, coordination, or foreknowledge. B. The mafia. RFK had aggressively targeted organized crime. The mob had motive, but the mafia does not have the ability to manipulate intelligence agencies, control over the Secret Service, the capacity to suppress evidence for 6 decades, more than 6 decades now. For RFK, the mob explanation was insufficient. And C, the CIA. Not the CIA as a whole, that's impossible, but a small, insulated compartment within or around the agency. Men with motive, experience, and resentment toward JFK after the Bay of Pigs disaster, budget cuts, the dismissal of top leadership, JFK moving toward détente with the Soviet Union, the push to end the war in Vietnam. RFK planned to reopen the investigation if he won in 1968. When I am president, I will open all the files. He never got the chance. To understand the structural logic of possible conspiracy, we turn to Mancur Olson's logic of collective action. Large groups cannot coordinate high-risk actions without leaks. The incentive collapse. The costs are too high. The benefits are diluted. Small groups, on the other hand, share strong incentives, require no broad cooperation, can enforce loyalty, can maintain secrecy, act with speed and precision. This aligns perfectly with public choice theory, which examines how bureaucratic actors, intelligence operatives, political appointees, military planners pursue self-interest, power, budget, reputation, influence. JFK threatened all of this. So, if there were conspirators, the optimal group size is 4 or 5 individuals with overlapping motives and access, like Allen Dulles, former CIA director, bitter toward JFK, fired by JFK, James Angleton, CIA counterintelligence chief, master of covert operations, General Charles Cabell, deputy CIA director, fired by JFK, Earl Cabell, mayor of Dallas, brother of Charles Cabell, with intelligence ties, and some X, an operational coordinator whose identity remains unknown. This is not an accusation, of course. It is a structural, incentive-based model. The minimum number of actors needed for a maximum impact. Long silence event. In strategic analysis, conspiracies fail because people talk, but small conspiracies succeed because each member knows the others. Betrayal is dangerous. The payoff for silence is high. The cost of defection is catastrophic. Loyalty is enforced through mutual dependence. This becomes a Nash equilibrium. No one improves their payoff by breaking ranks, rules. Here is where John Nash's work is deeply relevant. His Nash equilibrium concept, for which he won the 1994 Nobel Prize in Economic Science, shows how independent decision makers can find a stable outcome. No actor improves their outcome by speaking. Silence becomes the dominant strategy. The system stabilizes. 60 years of silence is statistically improbable for a large conspiracy. Improbable for a large conspiracy. For a micro cell of 4 or 5 intelligence-trained operators, not only possible, predictable. Now we confront the official narrative, Lee Harvey Oswald acting alone. Publicly it's simple, strategically it is a house of cards. Let's break it down. Oswald supposedly hit 3 shots total, 2 shots on target, 1 being lethal, all within 8 seconds, using a cheap, poorly maintained rifle, from an awkward elevator angle, at a moving limousine. Marine snipers, FBI marksmen, and military reconstruction teams have repeatedly struggled to reproduce this. Game theory calls this a low probability action mode, an outcome so unlikely that it demands alternative explanations. Kennedy and Governor Connally were hit in a pattern requiring one bullet to strike, change direction multiple times, cause several wounds, exit nearly intact. One bullet doing all this? Possible, but extremely improbable. If a lone shooter is captured, you get a confession, you secure evidence, you close the case, you reassure the nation, but Oswald is silenced, publicly, brutally, immediately. If he acted alone, Ruby's action is senseless. If Oswald wasn't alone, silencing him is strategic necessity. Oswald just happens to live along the roof, work at the Texas School book depository, be present in the perfect position at the perfect time. And who helped coordinate Dallas logistics? Mayor Earl Cabell, who had intelligence ties and whose brother Charles was fired by JFK. Coincidence? Possible. But when coincidence cluster, strategists look for coordination. For Oswald to be the only shooter, a whole chain of unlikely events must align. Perfect timing, perfect window of opportunity, perfect shot sequences, perfect bullet trajectory, perfect police errors, perfect access of Ruby, perfect silence afterward. This is what strategy researchers call a low probability, high dependency event chain. And such chains almost never succeed without coordination. If the assassination involved more than one person, who could realistically orchestrate it? Not the CIA as a whole, too big, too many moving parts. Not the military as a whole, impossible, leaks would be immediate. Not the mafia, insufficient capabilities. Not foreign governments. Intelligence reports refute coordination, which leaves a small, insulated group inside or adjacent to America's intelligence community with personal and strategic motives, access and capability. Men who were fired by Kennedy, felt humiliated by the Bay of Pigs, saw Kennedy as weak against communism, opposed leaving Vietnam, feared policy changes that threatened their power. This aligns perfectly with Olson's theory, public choice incentives, game theory equilibria, historical animosists. In this framework, the JFK assassination was not a chaotic act of a lone drifter. It was a calculated, highly disciplined, interest-driven operation. So what does game theory tell us? Not who pulled the trigger, not which exact individuals acted, but this. The official story requires too many miracles. A coordinated small group model requires none. It is the only coherent theory. The JFK assassination, viewed through the cold, rational lens of strategy and incentives, looks less like the work of a lone drifter and more like the outcome of a calculated, self-preserving, interest-driven decision made by a small cluster of men with motive, means and opportunity. A terrible decision that reshaped American history. A decision still hidden in the shadows of 1963. A decision that even 60 years later, now even more than 60 years later, remains the ultimate unsolved game.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago. President Lyndon Johnson has left the hospital in Dallas, but we do not know to where he has proceeded. Presumably, he will be taking the oath of office shortly and become the 36th President of the United States.